Yeah.
Okay, are we back? Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, Chair, I'm not technically minded, but I press the button on the side, it was easier. Just one of the questions, Chair, as well. You know, I've looked at the radius on this, on the screens, and they said, you know, the 50-metre radius. By counted, there's like 57 properties, you know, 20 of those properties rejected. So that's virtually 45% of the people in that area has rejected this application. What rationale do we actually sort of look at it as what the planning department sort of allow there? Because if 20 properties have actually have complained about it, what sort of allowance does the planning department look at those applications, the rejections of the application?
Guidance is clear in this respect, Councillor. The weight of objection, the number of objections in and of itself isn't an issue. Basically, we've got to look at the substance of the issues raised. So, as I said, it doesn't matter whether no one objects to an application, we still might find it unacceptable. It doesn't matter whether hundreds object, we might find it acceptable. So, it comes down to the substance of those comments. We have addressed those comments in the report and consider, everything being equal, that this application is acceptable from a planning perspective.
Yeah, also, I was reading through as I went down, actually, when I said what the room sizes were. I did notice on the 7.4.4, the HMO Licence Office Department originally raised concerns with regards to the size of the communal kitchen. So they've actually noticed the size. He said, despite this, so they have subsequently confirmed that the HMO licence was issued in December. But then they've also applied a discretionary 10% room reduction size and therefore issued the HMO licence. So that means that if every HMO comes in then with the size of the rooms, they're going to put a 10% discretion applied to each room. You know, I think that's unacceptable, really. You know, for the size of and the property itself.
Sorry, I can't advise on this stance taken by the licensing authority, but as I said, we did ask Jonathan to attend. So, Jonathan, if I can pass this over to you, please, in terms of that discretionary 10%. Thank you.
Yes, no problem at all. So, in the similar way in which Andrew described needing to have regard to what a planning inspector might think, we in environmental health have to have regard to what the residential property tribunal are likely to say if we refuse a licence and that decision is appealed. So our experience and our experience of the experience of other local authorities is that when you look at a property in the rounds, if there's one room which is slightly too small but on the whole the property has enough space, our experience is that on appeal we would lose that case and it would be granted permission by the residential property tribunal. So in this case, because the living room was an adequate size and a commitment was given to keeping the living room as a living room, that's why when we looked at the proposal in the rounds, we came to the conclusion that a licence should be issued.
Yeah, Chair. I just don't like that. I just don't like it, actually, really, to be honest, because I think they'll do that to every application on the HMO more likely. I would recommend, we actually refuse the application, like Councillor Watkins said, the amenity space and the size of the kitchen. I accept that if he wants to go for a 3-bedroom HMO, I'm more than happy to accept that, but not to do a 4 HMO and lose an amenity space and the size of the kitchen as well.
Councillor Horton.
It was a question for Jonathan as well. It was a very, very similar question that was just asked. What proportion is this 10% rule applied to? How often is it utilised? Was my one question. And secondly, if the room is 6.5 square meters, I'm assuming that's wall to wall, so that's with no cupboards or counter spaces installed. So or utilities. We're not talking. That doesn't include any. Would I be right in saying that before I continue?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So we'll assume we're just going to stick one run of cupboards in. So that's going to be, what's the cupboard? 600 mil, so 600 mil deep, so 60 centimeters deep. The length of the wall. We're going to be, as soon as you do that, you're going to be taking up a vast amount of utilisable space, as in walkway. Stick a cooker and a washing machine in there, and all the other utensils, the other bits and pieces that you would have in any normal kitchen. I'm assuming it's going to be a sort of galley style kitchen. It is completely unfeasible to expect people to be cooking, washing clothes, and then people walking past to make their way to a shower facility. It's just, sorry, to me, it begs belief that we would accept something so small for 4 adults to be living in and sharing, and be expected to live a normal and happy life in those sorts of conditions. I use the word condition lightly, because it seems like third world conditions to me to expect people to live like that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Watkins.
Yes, Chair, just a question to the officers. I understand within 50 metres, is it they need, there is HMO? If not, I noticed there's a number of HMOs adjacent to the other streets. Are they 4-bedroom or 3-bedroom HMOs? Do we know?
We wouldn't know from the planning perspective whether licensing would have that information, and whether they'd have it to hand, I don't know. But this is to do, this assessment is to consider the concentration, excuse me, of HMO, so that's why we use it.
And that if they were all 3-bedroom HMOs, or if there was a 4-bedroom HMOs, obviously it's been granted previously and possibly had the license as well. But if they're only 3-bedroom HMOs, as I said in my first lot of questions, I'm quite happy for it to go to a 3-bedroom HMO, but I have concerns in regards to the amenity and the reduction in the kitchen space. It doesn't meet our standards. Whether it meet, obviously it doesn't meet the licensing standards, but they're quite willing to accept that reduction.
Just to be clear, I fully appreciate the comment, but the kitchen size standard is the same whether it's 3, 4 or 5 residents. So for up to 5 residents, the same standard would be applied. So all, as I said, members might think this would be better as a 3-person, but from a size and space standards, it's the same consideration.
But the licensing authority remarks on the reduction. It doesn't meet their licensing standards, although they are quite willing to accept the 10% reduction. But what concerns me, because of that, also the amenity space has been reduced, the living room, so therefore the only amenity space is the kitchen, basically, but that's been reduced by 10%. They're quite happy to accept that.
There's still a lounge, a communal lounge as well as the kitchen. No, well, there are at ground floor level at the moment. There's a dining room and lounge. there would be a bedroom at ground floor level and the lounge would remain. So at the front of the house, can you put the plans up? Sorry, Jake. The rear dining room is the bedroom, the front room is the lounge.
Chair, could we have the plan put back up,
Yeah.
please?
Yeah, so at the front you've got the lounge, which is a communal lounge.
So just to take members through the existing drawing again, so on the left we have the existing floor plan which shows the existing lounge, hallway, dining room, moving through to the kitchen, utility, hall area, bathroom. The drawing on the right hand side is the proposed ground floor plan, so we have the hallway, retained lounge area. This is to be turned into a bedroom that was the dining room. All other spaces remain the same, so we have the hallway leading through to the kitchen, hall, utility area, bathroom. I hope that clarifies.
My apologies to everybody. I thought that front one was going to be a bedroom as well. Sorry.
Do we have a proposer for the officer's recommendations? To grant, to approve the recommendations? No?
Sorry, Chair, I couldn't really hear what you said then.
Do we have a proposer for the officer's recommendations? As that's failed, is there a motion? Anyone want to bring a motion forward?
The Chair recommend refusal of application due to the size of the kitchen, and also then for the bin storage, everything else. You know, you can also put the parking van over the parking zone. So is another one of our big bearers of the situation as well. It is, but.
Sorry, I didn't really catch what Councillor Jordan said. I'm assuming you're looking for reasons why. If I just list off mine, then you can make some words around that with the other members, please. Obviously it's the fact that the kitchen is below the standard, although it does meet this 10% threshold wall to wall. The kitchen is the thoroughfare to the toilet, and also the toilet is then the thoroughfare through the kitchen to everybody's room. I'm not sure if I caught the bin store and the fact that the bins are going to have to be dragged through the house, which means they'll just be left out the front. And I'm not sure if there's any other comments that anybody else wanted to make, but those were the ones which I was most interested in. I'm sorry, it's not picking up the sound from the chamber very well. I don't know if John is the same for yourself.
Councillor Reynolds?
You're on mute, Councillor.
You're on mute, John.
Apologies. Sorry, Chair. I was going to say the same as Councillor Horton. Actually, I was struggling to pick up what was being said in the chamber, and I actually wanted to make a couple of quick comments before you move to the vote, if that's okay. Am I too late to make a couple of extra comments?
Carry on.
Sorry, Chair. Just confirming I'm still okay to add to the debate, or have we gone past that point?
No, you can make a comment.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, having listened to everything that's been said, my gut instinct is to go along with what most people are saying. My gut instinct on this is that it is too small. Where the toilet is not practical. But then, as I said earlier, we are constrained by the fact that we've got rules we have to abide by. We can't be voting on, as a planning committee, we can't be voting on gut instinct. We have to vote on rules and regulations.
Excuse me, Councillor Reynolds. A motion is is being moved to a motion.
Right,
So-
that's why I
sorry.
asked permission, first of all, to speak on this. I thought I'd been given that permission. Right, if the motion has been moved, I'll stop there. All right, thanks.
Carry on, Councillor Reynolds.
That was carry on, John, if you didn't quite catch it yet.
I didn't know. Oh, this is a nightmare, isn't it?
I'll explain myself. The motion has failed. Now we're discussing on the reason why to approve. Okay, the second motion.
John, I got my headphones on so I can probably hear a bit better. What he said then was, we're discussing the reasons why we're refusing. So that's what we're talking about at the moment, which is what I think you were about to say anyway.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, Chair, because what I wanted to say was part of the original debate, but we've moved past that, so that's fine. We'll just move on to the vote.
Councillor Rheoli, do you want something to say?
No, I think you've clarified it, Chair, and the officers have. The motion has been moved. It has been formally seconded. Maybe, we could go to the vote.
Before you do vote, members, I do want to be really clear in this regard. So Councillor Jordan has raised 3 different issues there. The kitchen size being below standards. As I said, members are minded. As I said, you are welcome to adopt that as a reason for refusal. Obviously, licensing has been approved. They are separate standards and the licence has been granted. And on the appeal decision we are going to refer you to at the end of this committee, the inspector is very clear these are separate from the planning policy framework and should not be used in isolation in terms of there's a 0.5 metre deficiency means we've got to refuse. So you need to bear that in mind firstly. Secondly, with regards to bins and waste disposal, again, that other appeal decision is very clear on that the amount of storage space required is akin for a 4-bed HMO to a 3-bed dwelling. There's no change there, and storage at the rear was found to be acceptable. So you need to bear those things in mind before proceeding, I would suggest, because otherwise I do think you are opening the council up to award of costs against us for unreasonable behaviour. Unless you can evidence the harm in this particular case, as I said, shortfall, you've articulated your concern with regards to accessing the bathroom through the kitchen. If that is your consideration in terms of the impact on the amenity and well-being of future occupiers, then that is something you may wish to do. You may wish to join it in with the amenity space shortfall, the kitchen, but as I said, I think some of these things will be difficult to substantiate harm at appeal.
Councillor Reynolds.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, I will come back in there simply because of what Andrew's just said, because that was pretty well the point I wanted to make, to be honest. As much as my gut instinct is to vote to refuse this, the planning regs and the situation, as far as the kitchen is, where the toilet is concerned, that's the same for every house on that street. That's a standard design for that street. That would be the same whether it's a family living there or whether it's an HMO. Similarly for the bins, as much as we object to the fact that the bins have to come through the house, that's also the same for every other resident in that street. So, as much as I want to vote against this, I'm struggling to find valid planning reasons to justify it that doesn't leave the council open to appeal and costs. And we do have to be mindful about wasting council and public money basically on something that we're not going to win.
Councillor Orton.
And could you just confirm something for me? Because the line's not isn't amazing, as we've already established. purely from a planning perspective, what is the minimum room size that you would require? Just talk about the kitchen area.
Yeah, from a planning perspective, there are no minimum size requirements. What we do in the HMO supplementary planning guidance is we refer to the licensing standards. So that's what we use as our guide. That's what other authorities do as well.
So this is another chicken and egg scenario then? We've had this problem, this conversation, we've had this conversation before, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, yeah, you know where I'm going, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Right, can we clarify the reasons for the refusal?
The one was said was the kitchen size and also the bathroom as well, for the well-being of the people as well, you know, who live there as well, because that's the main concern as well, the well-being of the people. I mean, well, like I said, I accept if you went to a 3-bedroom HMO, you know, it gives a bit more weight, I think, a bit more for them, but that was my 2 recommendations: the bathroom, both the options for the bathroom and the well-being of the people themselves who actually live there, and also the size of the kitchen is inadequate.
Okay. Can I recommend, therefore, that members consider having one reason for refusal that reflects the shortfall in the kitchen space requirement, alongside the layout, which requires the sole shared bathroom to be accessed through the shared communal kitchen, as being detrimental to the amenity and well-being of future occupiers of that property. Okay, thank you.
I'd like to, that's very sensible. If that's what we're going to go with, I would like to vote for that, please.
Do we have a seconder? And those in favour of the motion as set out by Councillor Jordan? For? Against? Any abstentions? The application is refused. Thank you.
It's not that item next. It's not that item next. I'm a little concerned about being included. Is Councillor Rheoli staying?
Oh yeah, he got stuck.
Is Councillor Rheoli staying on? No, but for the final one, he is staying.
Yeah. So which one am I going to now? This is...
I wasn't intending to. That's okay. That's what it was.
Moffat and Rheoli, they're not speaking just.
So they are speaking as ward members.
All right, okay.
So
I am going down to speaking. Right, we're going to application 25-0589, land the rear of Chapswell Road, Byways, Chapswell Road, Bishton, Langston, and we have a speaker, Mr. Lewis. Our agent is Mr. Lewis, and And the two ward colleagues, Councillor Rheoli and Councillor Mumford. Yeah.
Okay.
Vicky Quinn is presenting. We have the application first. Presentation first. And then public speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm a bit low here. Okay, so this application seeks full planning permission for the erection of 9 detached dwellings in the Langstone ward of Newport. The application is being reported to committee at the request of Councillors Rheoli and Mogford due to concerns relating to the lack of active travel line links through the site. The site is located north of Chepstow Road and is within the urban boundary. It is broadly rectangular shaped and is surrounded to the east, west and north by existing residential development. It is thought to have an agricultural use and contains a machinery shed to the north-western corner of the site. There is a small watercourse running to the southern boundary of the site. Both pedestrian and vehicular access to the site is via a new access coming from an existing spur from Stockwood View. The layout comprises of 3 dwellings to the north and 6 dwellings orientated eastwards with their rear gardens bordering the western site boundary to the south of the site, where the Suds Basin is proposed also. The dwellings vary somewhat in terms of design and would each have 4 bedrooms and are shown to have 2 off-street parking spaces as well as a garage. The site layout includes 2 visitor parking spaces, and areas of green landscaping. Whilst located within the urban boundary, there is a presumption in favour of development having an existing agricultural use. The site constitutes greenfield land. The site is somewhat of an anomaly in that it is agricultural land within the urban boundary surrounded by built development. It's not publicly accessible open space. The site does not have an agricultural grading according to Welsh Government agricultural land classification, and so the proposals will not result in the loss of high-value agricultural grade land, and nor does it have a high value in terms of ecology. The site is sustainably located adjacent to the A48 with public transport connections, and in view of this and the above, it is considered that the proposals would meet the overall aims and aspirations of PPW despite constituting greenfield land. The layout and density of the development is in keeping with the surrounding development, which is in general 2-storey detached dwellings with semi-open frontages and enclosed rear gardens, and the layout is considered to be well thought out and spacious. As previously noted, the southern end of the site adjacent to Chepstow Road would have a Suds feature, opposed to any built form development which would soften the impact of the development from the main arterial route. In terms of boundary treatment, it is largely proposed to remain as is currently, with the existing hedgerow, which is outside of the applicant's ownership, to southern boundary to be retained. Existing vegetation along the northern, eastern and western boundaries is to be retained and enhanced where necessary. Detailed soft landscaping details have been provided and reviewed by the Council's landscape officer, who confirms the proposals are acceptable. Minimum distances as set out in the Council's new dwellings SPG are generally exceeded, with over 21 metres between habitable room windows and rear garden depths generally over 10 metres. The proposals are not considered to be have an overbearing impact or a demonstrably loss of light having regard to light tests set out in the Council's SPG. The proposed layout would have a high standard of amenity for future occupiers and would not result in an adverse impact to the amenity of the existing neighbours. The proposed access is situated between two existing dwellings in Stockwood View, numbers 8 and 10, and the development would result in all vehicle traffic travelling through Stockwood View and passing these properties. The existing layout of the estate lends itself well to link the proposed development, and given the location of the site within the urban boundaries, such activity is to be anticipated and is no different to the movement of vehicles through other parts of the estate currently. The Council's Highways Officer raises no objections subject to specified conditions. Objections have been received from neighbouring residents due to concerns regarding potential noise and disturbance during the construction phase of development. Such matters are rarely considered justified to withhold planning permission due to their temporary nature, and it is recommended that if planning permission is granted, a condition requiring a construction management plan to be submitted for approval is included. The site is adjacent to Chepstow Road and at its nearest point would also be within 200 metres of the M4 motorway. The application is accompanied by an acoustic report which has been reviewed by the Council's environmental health officers, who confirm no objections are offered to the proposed development subject to the conditions relating to noise insulation, including trickle ventilation and acoustic wall to the southern site boundary and to the rear of plots 1 to 3. As noted above, vehicle access to the site is proposed from Stockwood View. Each property would be served by 2 off-street parking spaces and a garage having internal dimensions of 3 metres by 6 metres, which meets the requirements of the parking SPG. In addition, 2 visitor parking spaces are shown within the layout. Covered cycle parking provision for cycles is to be provided within the rear gardens of each property. The Council's Highways Officer confirms no objections are offered to this, subject to conditions. Neighbouring objections have been received relating to the unsuitability of the neighbouring estate roads to accommodate additional traffic due to the layout. However, the estate is modern with the roads adopted by the Council and subject to 20-mile-per-hour speed limit. And there is no reasonable grounds to withhold planning permission on this basis, particularly when considering the number of dwellings proposed, which is unlikely to result in an adverse impact over and above existing situation. Objections have also been raised with regard to loss of parking provision at the Hammerhead as a result of the opening up of the proposed access. However, given the low density of the surrounding residential development and with properties having a generally good level of off-street parking, parking does not appear to be causing a significant issue in relation to highway safety and amenity, and whilst it may not always be possible for occupants to park directly adjacent to their homes where private off-road parking is already full, it's likely that there will be an on-street parking availability within walking distance. Indication of a footpath link from the south to south of the site, to Chepstow Road was initially shown on the site layout. Officers were keen to pursue this in the interest of pedestrian permeability and in order to provide a direct pedestrian link from the site onto Chepstow Road. However, this is not considered feasible. This is due to the location of the path at the south of the site, away from the houses, resulting in it having an unlit and no natural surveillance and adjacent to a SUDS feature, potentially making it dangerous in the event that the basin is full of water and having an unlit path adjacent to it in close proximity. The path would also span land which is outside of the applicant's ownership, as it does not directly adjoin the public highway, and there is an area of unregistered land between the application site and the highway. There's an alternative route to the A48 Visalia Way, and the occupants of the proposed dwellings would only be required to travel an additional approximately 70 metres more on foot than residents already in Stockwood View in order to reach Chepstow Road. As such, a condition to require a footpath to be provided would not meet the necessary tests. Ward councillors have referred to the loss of an adjacent footpath link in the neighbouring development. However, this development cannot be used to rectify issues of access for the adjoining development. The scheme is acceptable in all other regards and would provide a very high standard of amenities for future occupants, as well as contributions to affordable housing. The development is considered acceptable despite the absence of a footpath link. In terms of ecology, no objections have arisen from the Council's Ecology Officer, and subject to conditions to require biodiversity enhancement, the proposals are considered to be acceptable. Whilst there are no trees within the development site, there are trees and hedgerow around the perimeter, and the application is supported by a tree survey. Of those identified and surveyed, there were 4 individual trees, 4 tree groups and 5 hedgerows. A section of the hedgerow and trees is to be removed in order to create the access into the site, and the report confirms that all others are to be retained and provides details of protection during construction. The Council's tree officer has been consulted. And confirms no objections are offered to the proposals. Detailed soft landscaping details have been provided and reviewed by the Council's landscape officer, who also confirms the proposals to be acceptable and can be secured by condition. The site is within Flood Zone 3 for surface water and small water courses in accordance with the flood map for planning. This application is for development of highly vulnerable nature, residential. The application is accompanied by a flood consequence assessment in accordance with TAM 15. It's the role of the lead local flood authority to assess such reports, and they are required in relation to surface water, when they are required in relation to surface water flood risk. The Council's drainage officers have reviewed the FCA and advised that it provides the information required. The FCA confirms that the shallow, low probability encroachment affecting dwelling 1, as you can see in this slide, the outline of that dwelling is shown in green, and the encroachment just approaches the bottom corner of it. The FCA confirms that the shallow, low probability encroachment affecting this dwelling results in a very low hazard classification in line with TAN 15. The revised access arrangements via Stockwood View remain acceptable, with the updated FCA confirming safe access and egress is achieved. The updated FCA demonstrates that flood consequences for highly vulnerable development are acceptable, and the proposals now satisfy TAM 15 requirements. The SAB raises no objection to the planning application, subject to the requirement that full SAB approval is obtained prior to commencement of development. This is required under a separate legislative body, and the LPA will not condition this. Notwithstanding, officers are satisfied that proposals are acceptable in terms of flood risk. Refuse collection would be undertaken on street from the access road through the site. There is one bin collection point at the northern end of the site and one at the southern end of the site, serving each shared driveway arrangement. Refuse vehicles are able to stop at the curbside, and swept path analysis has shown refuse vehicles are able to turn appropriately and enter and exit the site in a forward gear. The Council's waste officer has been consulted and confirms no objections are offered. The applicant has agreed to the financial contributions as set out in the officer report, and if the application is granted, it is recommended that it is with a legal agreement to secure these contributions. So in conclusion, the proposals are considered to provide a high-quality development that is in character with the surrounding area and will afford future occupiers a very high standard of amenity. The proposals will not result in an adverse impact in terms of neighbouring amenity. It is recommended to members that the application is granted, subject to the conditions as set out in the report.
Which do you want to go first? We do have speakers. Councillor Mockford. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee. Can I first check that those online can hear me well? Because there was... Oh, sorry.
Sorry, it's the agent first. Sorry, Councillor Mockford. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you. Chair and members of the Planning Committee, thank you for having me here today. On behalf of Harmony Homes, I'd like to thank the case officer for his support and due diligence over the past couple of months. The application has benefited from detailed discussions and careful scrutiny, which has resulted in a robust policy compliance scheme before you today. Members will be aware that this application is being considered by committee predominantly due to the request for a pedestrian footpath through the southern part of the site onto the A48, otherwise known as Chepstow Road. Whilst we fully recognise the importance of promoting active travel and pedestrian permeability, the applicant has explored the feasibility of delivering a footpath through the lower part of the site. However, there are three clear and material reasons why this link is not considered achievable. Firstly, delivering a footpath in this location would require works to be undertaken on land outside of the applicant's ownership and therefore control. Planning law is clear that it would be unreasonable to impose a condition requiring works on third-party land where there is no certainty that those works can actually be delivered. Secondly, pursuing such an arrangement would likely lead to a ransom position whereby control of the intervening land could prevent the development from coming forward altogether. That in turn would jeopardise the delivery of 9 much-needed family homes within the existing urban area of Langstone, alongside agreed financial contributions towards affordable housing and leisure provision. Thirdly, and importantly, following discussions with the case officer, it's been agreed that the principle of providing a footpath in this specific location would conflict with the South Wales Police secured by design standards. The requested route would sit immediately adjacent to a proposed suds basin, entirely unlit, which for ecological reasons, and lacked natural surveillance from surrounding dwellings. In our view, that raises legitimate concerns regarding public safety, which weigh against the provision of a footpath in this particular part of the site. It is also important to note that other pedestrian routes in the area provide access to the A48, resulting in only a modest additional walking distance. Officers have concluded that while a direct southern link may well be desirable, it is not necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms due to the existing active travel provision. Beyond this single issue, the scheme has received no objections from statutory consultees, including highways, drainage, ecology, environmental health, and lastly, Natural Resources Wales. The proposed site is located within a highly sustainable location, sits comfortably within the surrounding area, and represents a logical windfall opportunity. It will deliver high-quality homes for local people, along with biodiversity enhancement and Section 106 contributions, including over 115,000 towards affordable housing and 78,000 towards leisure provision within the Langstone ward. In summary, this is a carefully considered and policy-compliant proposal. The absence of a southern footpath is justified on clear planning, deliverability and safety grounds, and the scheme remains sustainable and acceptable as currently proposed. We respectfully ask members to support the officer's recommendation and grant planning permission subject to the Section 106 agreement and necessary planning conditions. Thank you for your time today.
Councillor Muppet.
Thank you again, Chair. So good morning, Chair. Good morning, Committee. Thank you for letting us address our concerns as ward councillors today. At the onset, let me be very clear that we are almost in total agreement with the plan that's submitted. Okay, we have no issues with the plan, except we're raising and asking for the reinstatement of the proposed path onto the A48. So this proposed path did feature in the original proposals. We spoke to the planning officers and we worked closely with them throughout this, and for most of the time the planning officers were in total agreement with us, and the terms of pedestrian permeability and active travel were bandied about as key issues. So just to drill down a bit, and I want to be very clear on this, I want you to really pick up on what I'm saying. In our discussions with the planning, there were 3 reasons given for the removal of this proposed footpath, and you've heard the agent just say them. I'll reiterate. A lack of lighting, access around the balancing pond, or the suds, I think you've referred to, the pond, if you like. Access across unregistered land between the A48 and the developer's land. This is a narrow strip of land, I would estimate about 2 metres, that joins from the field as is to the A48 pathway. Okay. Just to look at where we are today, before we start talking about where we're going to be, already we have similar footpaths that give access to Grenadier Drive, which is just down the road, access to the Centenary Park, access to Court Meadow properties, access to Priory Drive, access to Stockwood View, access to Priory Crescent. But it's worth mentioning that the access to Stockwood View has effectively been removed by the new owner of the land. And during that process, we had a lot of residents who were unhappy that they'd lost their access route. So we are asking for this access route on the new development to be reinstated. We hear a lot these days about active travel and pedestrian permeability. The 3 points that were raised, access to the land from the A48. Again, let's look at where we are today. Currently, it's a field, an agricultural field, we've heard, and the only access route to that field is through the A48. So today, the farmer, the owner, is accessing that land through the A48. The strip of land, the 2-metre strip of land adjacent to the development, is actually accredited as adopted highway. So with adopted highway, as I understand it, because I have an adopted highway at the bottom of my drive, it gives access rights to, in my case, to drivers and to pedestrians. So being able to access this field, it's currently accessible and is accessed. There is a laid down, I suppose it's stones and whatever, so you can visibly see the access to this field today, and so it is being used. As we move forward, we're asking the committee to put conditions in that says that there is a path reinstated to the proposed plan, and that as far as the lighting is concerned, there will be street lighting for this development. So it's a case of extending the lighting to the path as necessary. As for the safety of the sud, then clearly it would take fencing the sud off, and in which case there would be no safety concerns. This is what we see in other routes that go to estates where there is an access path provided. I think that covers my speech. So what I'm recommending, or what I'm asking is that the committee recommend that this path originally proposed is reinstated, and that the 3 obstacles put forward are not really obstacles to progress. Thank you.
Councillor Rheoli.
Thank you, Chair. The inclusion of this footpath connecting the pathway site to the A48, the application has a lot of merits as well. However, this is not merely a nice amenity to have this footpath. It's a statutory necessity under the Active Travel Wales Act 2013. We have a legal duty to improve routes for walkers and cyclists. And if we improve this development in the Bishop and Langton ward today, that lacks a direct link to our primary transport artery, we are effectively designing in-car dependency, not just for now, but for decades and decades to come. Planning Policy Wales is explicit. The sustainable transport hierarchy puts walking and cycling at the very top. That's important. It puts walking and cycling at the very top. By failing to provide this link, we're currently to the current site. It ignores the hierarchy within this area. Residents are served from a wider network. They're forced, if it wasn't there, they would be forced into longer journeys or more likely into their cars to make the shortest trips. Furthermore, the well-being of future generations acts require us to think about the long-term health of our community. A direct, safe connection to the A48 promotes physical activity and reduces the carbon footprint within this area and within our ward. To grant permission without a legally binding requirement for this pathway would be a missed opportunity, and I would argue a failure to meet the obligations under the National Planning Guidance. I ask this committee to ensure that a link is secured via a 106 agreement or a robust planning condition, and to ensure the development is truly integrated, sustainable and fit for the area, Newport and for now. So really, we're not here saying turn the application down. We're here saying we've identified that the strip of land is actually adopted highway. It belongs to us. And what we're saying is the reasons it was included prior to this was absolutely correct. So, because of the Active Travel Wales 2013, because of the Planning Wales hierarchy, because of the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, making this accessible to the A48 not only reduces the immediate carbon footprint for the people there living in the new 9 houses, it opens up all the other houses for people to walk a safer route. At the moment, we have school children who have to walk along the Cat's Ash Road. We actually had the school bus diverted from the Cat's Ash Road for a pick-up point because it was deemed unsafe. Absolutely deemed by highways as to be unsafe. They now pick up on the A48. So giving them this pathway connects them to the A48 and makes life simpler. If you want to go to the shops, connecting to the A48. You want to use transport, the buses, A48. So it's not a big ask, and it's not doing it just because we want to be awkward. We don't. We want to just have what was put out prior. We want to embrace all the good acts and all the good guidance and the Wellbeing Future Generations Act. We do not want to miss this opportunity. We support the application with this footpath in it. Thank you.
Any questions?
For clarity, Chair, could we please see again a plan of the site and have indicated the footpath that is being proposed by the two councillors and the one that's actually been recommended in the report?
So there isn't a plan showing the footpath because there never was a plan showing the footpath through the site, that is. There was the original site layout plan, if I show you that. So this is what, sorry, not showing my screen. So this is the very first site layout plan that came in with the application. We've had various Yeah, so we've had various revisions of this site layout for different reasons, but this was the very first one that came in. So as you can see, there was no footpath link shown through the site, but what there was an indication to the south of the site here for a potential footpath link. So on that basis, officers initially pursued that, but for the reasons outlined in the report, which I won't go over again, consider that that's not feasible. Sorry, what was the other part of your question?
If I've understood correctly, it's been suggested that another route formed the footpath. I think it said it was something like 70 metres distant.
Yeah, okay. So this is the alternative route. This is the route that the occupiers of the site would need to take, both by foot and in vehicle. I'm just going to zoom in a bit on that. Nope. So this is the site access here that would be opened up into the site, and this is the walking route. So down Stockwood View, and then along Celia Way and Catsash Road. This stops ever so short of Chepstow Road, which is just here, but this route is approximately 0.3 miles or 6 minutes by foot. And these are all adopted roads with pavement. So that would be the route that the residents within this site would have to take without this footpath. Without a footpath directly linking the development to the A48 to the south.
Well, thank you.
Give us Councillor Horton next.
Possibly. The footpath entrance at the end of Stockwood View, is that not accessible, or can we just confirm that one, please?
So the council would probably be in a better position to explain what's happened with that, because it's not part of this development and I don't know the full background. But this slide and where the cursor is, you can see what I believe is the footpath that they're referring to, which goes directly from Stockwood View down onto the A48 Chepstow Road to the south. It's my understanding that that footpath has been stopped up, closed by the third-party landowner.
Is that confirmed, or is that a hearsay?
It's not an adopted footpath. The council doesn't maintain it, so not entirely sure of the situation, because as I say, it crosses third-party land, but that is my understanding from the feedback from the councillors, is that it has been closed up.
I know the two councillors are now sat in the viewing area, but are they allowed to answer that question?
Yeah, sure.
Could you ask the question again? I only caught half of it.
Yeah, the entrance at the end of Stockwood View, which has got like the little bollards, or used to have the little bollards and stuff, and the street lighting at the end of it. Is that still open, or has that been closed off?
That's been closed off. The land there was sold as a small packet, and as it happens, a resident in Langstone has bought it. It's currently closed off with Harris fencing, and you'll see that there are 2 ponds there, and and effectively, I suppose that's a bridge over the pond, but there's just a...
It is.
Yeah. So that was what was there previously and accessible to the owners. That's now gone away. There's also, it's irrelevant, I guess, but there's also a pumping station on that land, which will be used by the developers. But that's in private ownership and it's gone. I won't go into too much detail.
That's in recent times then. In the last sort of last 6 months, I'd have thought.
Within the last, I would say within the last 6 months, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, I don't have any objections to this application. In fact, it almost seems that this plot of land was prepared with the road layouts that they have and the access. My only concern would have been if there had been another entrance straight onto Chepstow Road. That would have been my only question and my only hesitation towards being minded to approve. But obviously the road layout is such that that's not the case, so I'm minded to approve this application. Thank you.
Any other questions? Trevor?
Thank you, Chair. Could we have the map of the owner's, I would say, control, please?
So the red line shows the extent of ownership here. Oh, sorry.
Not on the screen.
Sorry, Councillor. So that red line shows the extent of the land ownership.
So why can't a footpath be put from that southern turning circle along the green area down to Chepstow Road?
So if I bring you onto this slide, it zooms in on the area that's relevant to the footpath and your questions. So the council's highways adoption finishes where my cursor is currently. So the area to the south of that, the footpath, is adopted, but the area to the north is unregistered. So this sliver of land between the footpath, which is adopted, and the southern site edge is unregistered. So we don't know who owns that part of piece of land.
So what is that border on the east side of that development? Is that a public footpath?
I'm not quite sure what you mean, sorry.
On the right-hand side, you've got the red line going up behind the development, which is already there.
Yeah.
What is that border along that red line?
Do you mean this area here?
No,
where my
going up
cursor
the
is?
full length of the development, proposed development.
Oh, this area here between the red line and the thin black line?
Yeah.
I don't know, in all honesty, what that black line indicates, but it's within the site
So it looks as though that goes down to the access on to Chepstow Road, to me.
It's, to my knowledge, it's not a formal or any sort of footpath. I'll try and show you an aerial view. So I'm not sure that that line indicates anything, to be honest with you. There is no footpath within the site currently. The southern access is gated. These are the gates. There's no way through currently.
Not current.
Chair, could I clarify?
I think Councillor Mogford is trying to say it is a footpath.
I have a printout from the council maps, which I've been studying. The adopted highway is shown on the maps as going right up to the boundary of the land. What's also shown on this agricultural land, you could share it if you like, but there is a pathway shown on there that is clearly shown on there as an existing path within the agricultural land is shown on the council's own maps. So I think that's important because this strip of land that we're talking about that's unregistered, I've not seen that gap. I've not seen any evidence of that, and perhaps planning can provide that evidence and project it up on the screen. Go to the council maps and show the gap.
In terms of the land being unowned, we've done a land registry search, so I can try and dig that out, but I might not be able to do it here and now. It might take a while, but we've done a land registry search which confirms that. We've also double-checked with highways, and they've confirmed that the strip that I referred to previously is not within their adoption.
Chair, that here shows exactly up there what's on the screen, that there is an access onto the Chepstow Road. So I don't see any reason why that footpath should remain or adjoins the southern turning circle on the development.
Councillors, I think we need to be clear on this point. We have got evidence that land is unregistered. Now, as officers, we can see some benefits in having a link through, a public access link through, in terms of active travel to get to Chepstow Road, but we're aware there are barriers to doing that. Firstly, in terms of land ownership, that is a clear barrier to being able to provide that. If members put a condition on, it would have to be negatively worded, and effectively it would stop that development happening until that access was provided. It might not happen. It might stymie the development completely. Even if there was an access provided, there are other considerations we have to concern in terms of how we make that access safe, which it does run along an existing hedgerow. We'd have ecological considerations, we'd have safety issues, we'd have lighting, we'd have to make sure it's acceptable. So there are merits to having it, and we're not saying there aren't. What we're saying is there are barriers to it, and as officers, we think that there's a need for additional housing, and that weighs in favour of the application. And when you weigh up all the application in the round, we can't use this application to rectify something that's happened off-site in terms of the neighbouring development where a section of land has been closed off to public access. We have to look at this application on its own. And effectively, as Vicky said in the report, there's an additional 70 metres to what residents currently have to walk. So we'd be saying that that's so unacceptable that you would be looking to put that condition on, because without it, we would be refusing that application. Thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have a proposer? Seconder. Can we go to the vote? All those for? Against? Any abstentions? Permission is granted. Application 25/0976, Malpas Park Primary School. Presenting officer is Lydia Burrows.
Chair, could I just make a comment? You have a photograph on here of Tredegar Park Primary School fence. I'm chair of governors there, just to be...
It's okay.
That's fine,
No,
Councillor.
so
It's
it
not
is
the
not-
application land, so that's fine.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a full application for the demolition of the existing 1.8 metre high rail fence and its replacement with a 2.4 metre high mesh fencing around Malpas Park Primary School. The fencing would extend around the east, south and west boundaries, with hedgerow proposed along the north boundary. The removal of 5 trees is also proposed in order to facilitate the works. Ordinarily, this application would be determined under delegated powers. However, this application was called to Planning Committee by Councillor Mudd to consider the impact that the proposed fencing would have on residential amenity within the immediate vicinity of the school. So this is showing the plans for the vehicle gates and part of the fencing. So officers consider that the proposed fencing would not result in a harmful impact on residential amenity. There are suitable separation distances between the fencing and neighbouring properties, and the mesh design would retain views into and out of the site. In terms of visual amenity, the existing 1.8 metre high rail fencing is a modest, unobtrusive feature within the street scene, and whilst the proposed fencing would alter the current appearance of the site, it would not result in an unduly obtrusive or overbearing addition. Steps have been taken to mitigate any visual harm by choosing a design that allows light and views clearly through it, and the colour being a colour that is compatible with that of the existing railing. It is also worth noting that the reasons for the fence, to improve security at the school, should be afforded substantial weight, and the need for the proposed fence is clearly being encouraged by Gwent Police, and the need to secure the school buildings, grounds and the safety of all users of it. So 5 trees are proposed to be removed in order to make way for the proposed fencing, and these are circled on the plan that you can see. Pruning works are also proposed to a number of trees to the north of the site. The tree officer advises that the tree loss is minor and would not impact on the setting or public amenity of the area. Amendments are proposed to the vehicular access, which you can also see on the slide, which proposes to set the gates back 2 metres in order to improve pedestrian visibility. No objections were received by consultees, including highways, ecology, tree, as well as Gwent Police. However, a number of objections were received from local residents relating to visual and residential amenity. So you'll see on the following few slides some of the photos of the site as existing. So whilst the fencing demarcates the boundaries, it does not act as a robust, secure periphery to the school grounds and presents a number of safeguarding concerns in its current form. For example, the existing fence includes footholds within its design, making it possible to climb. There are also objects such as a grip box and a bus stop adjacent to the boundary, which could further facilitate unauthorised access to the grounds. During the summer term, the Design and Out Crime Officer for Gwent Police identified the school as being highly likely used as a drop-off and pick-up point for the distribution of illegal substances. The school have worked closely with Gwent Police prior to submitting the application, and they support the proposed fencing as a secure and robust perimeter to safeguard pupils, staff and visitors. So to the left is the specification of the proposed fencing, and to the right is an example of the fencing at Tredegar Park Primary, which is of the same design as the proposed. So you can see that the close mesh design provides a high level of security whilst also maintaining clear and restricted visibility into and out of the site. The applicant has proposed that the fencing be coloured black, similar to that at Tredegar Park School. However, they advise that they are open to other colours should members consider another colour more suitable. So to conclude, officers consider that the proposal would not result in a harmful impact on visual and residential amenity, and substantial weight should be given to the reason for the proposed fence to improve security at the school. Officers therefore recommend that the application is granted with conditions. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Perkins.
So it says that a large amount of trees are being cut down. What proposals are there for replacing those?
So I'll just share my screen again. Sorry. So there's 5 trees proposed to be removed. So there's a group of 3 trees which identifies as G7, and then there's 2 other single trees that are proposed to be removed. There's also native hedgerow proposed to be planted along the northern boundary. All other trees are to remain on site.
Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Would there be any scope otherwise if the size of the fencing would be exactly the same? They say the same height of fencing what they got now, but as the same design as the same have they got now? Because I can see some residents that do say it's a bit of an eyesore, but I am concerned with safety of the children. I drive in there all the time, and sometimes the fences are easier to get. The kids can get over the fence on some parts of it. And I also noticed where those trees are. It's like they've got their forest school. Remember that area by there as well. So that's a bit of a thing to lose those trees for the children as well. But would there be any scope then to have the same fencing they got now at a higher level, maybe?
Sorry, so keeping the same design, are you saying?
Yeah, keep it the same design as it is, but with at a higher level. And I think as I looked at some of the comments on some of the neighbours, they said it looks a bit of an eyesore. It looks like they'd be caged in. But I think with the same design that they've got now, but maybe a bit higher, would that be suffice? So
we've had comments from Gwent Police, and they're saying that the fence must meet secured by design standards, which say that it should be at least 2.4 metres high and weld mesh, rather than the railings that are there at the moment.
Yeah, it's just maybe a comment more, maybe a comment if that could be done, but, I'm all for the security of the children, keep the children safe, and I totally agree, if it comes to it, I'll recommend the recommendation to a grant.
Councillor Cox.
Sorry, the point's been answered, I think. That I was just basically going through us where 6.4 comes from, but it's actually a set standard you're suggesting. Okay.
Councillor Reynolds.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, similar to some of the speakers that have spoken already, actually, but having read through some of the objections, the residents' objections, I can understand their concerns, but I think the reality is that the safety of the children and the comments of the police. I used to live in that area, so I know that school very well. I know the area very well, and I'm very familiar with seeing people in that school and on the grounds when the school's closed, and some of the activities that the police describe. I'm very familiar with seeing that myself. So I think the safety of the children has to take precedence here. The type of fence itself, although it's higher than the existing one, and I understand the concerns of the residents in that respect, but the design of it, we've seen these fences in other areas of the city, around Tredegar Park, around other schools, and they're actually less obtrusive than the one that's there at the moment, simply because it allows more light through. You can see through them, and they actually, from a distance, they actually blend in with background vegetation, etc. So, although I understand the concerns, I must admit, I think that the safety of the children and the prevention of some of these undesirable activities, I think it has to take precedence on this. I'm definitely in favour of this application. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. Only one question, Chair, and that's, what is the closest residential development to the fence? Do we know?
Sorry, just bear with me. It is in the officer report somewhere. So the properties along Wavell Drive are potentially the closest ones. So there's an approximate distance of 9 to 10 metres between the front boundary of those properties and the school's boundary fence, and then an approximate distance of 13 to 14 metres between the front elevation and the fence.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm happy.
Any more questions? Do we have a proposer? Seconder? Can we go to the vote? All those for? Against? Any abstentions? Recommended. Thank you. Just the appeals agenda now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I'm just coming back on to talk about 33 Walmer Road, which is one of the appeal decisions that we've listed on the agenda. Let's get on to the right slide first of all, that would be helpful. Sorry. Okay, so some members may recall that we presented this item to you in July 2025. It was for the change of use of this mid-terraced unit to a HMO, a 3-bedroom HMO actually. Officers recommended it to be granted subject to conditions. Members overturned that recommendation and refused it for 3 reasons. The 3 reasons related to the size of one of the bedrooms. So let's just take a look. Might jog some memories. Okay, so on the plan, members on the day were very concerned with the size of bedroom 3 on the first floor. So that's the box room on the front there. But in formulating the reasons for refusal, in addition to citing the small size of bedroom 3, members also refused it on the lack of secure and accessible bike storage and inadequate waste provision. So we've had a lot of discussions about all those things since that decision was made. So on this one, again, we had a situation where bike storage was occurring through the back or at the back of the unit, and so you'd have to push bicycles through the unit. Bedroom 3, which I think was probably the members' biggest concern, was actually notably below the 6.51 square metres licensing standards. It's actually about 5.4 square metres, so well below, even more than 10% below, as we've talked about that today. The other issue was lack of waste, and again it was back to that point of members perceiving that the waste generated by a HMO would be greater than the single dwelling. So the inspector, this is one we've actually had a decision on quite recently, and we're reporting it to you, so thought it was just worth spending a small amount of time explaining the inspector's reasoning. So the inspector has allowed the appeal, has allowed planning permission for the change of use to a 3-bed HMO, and in doing so has considered all the 3 reasons that members were concerned with. So in relation to bedroom 3, the inspector noted that it had a window, tall ceilings, there was a good level of natural light and outlook from the room, and despite its size, it could accommodate a single bed, a wardrobe, and additional storage space at the foot of the bed, allowing it to function as a single bedroom. She also considered the wider communal space provided by the HMO. So you'll see there on the left-hand side, the ground floor has a communal living room, a communal dining room, and a kitchen. The kitchen is also below the licensing standards by around 2 square metres. So 2 issues. We had the bedroom 3 falling below and the kitchen falling below. She noted that all those rooms, again, had natural light, windows that were reasonably sized, and, in her view, provided sufficient space for the limited number of occupants to cook, eat, relax, and socialise simultaneously. The inspector had regard to the rear garden, so it was reasonably sized, and obviously is adding to the amenity space, and the fact that it was conveniently accessible to all the occupants. It could provide outdoor amenity space as well as adequate space for drying clothes and other functional requirements such as cycle storage. And in the inspector's view, all of those communal areas of amenity would reduce the reliance on individual bedrooms for the associated activities. So the inspector considered that whilst bedroom 3 falls, in her words, marginally below the licensing space standards as cited by the council, these standards are separate from planning policy framework and should not be used in isolation to determine the quality of accommodation for planning purposes. And with this in mind, was not persuaded that the modest size of bedroom 3 would significantly undermine the overall quality of the accommodation. So that reason for refusal fell away. Cycle parking and waste provision. So the inspector was mindful of our adopted SPGs relative to both those issues. Waste and recycling bins would be stored in the forecourt of this unit, exactly the same as its use as a dwelling. She considered that to be entirely adequate. And again, given the modest number of HMO occupants, considered it unlikely that the proposal would generate significantly more waste than the lawful residential use. And of course, the officers had already said in their report no additional receptacles would be given to the HMO based on occupancy levels. The inspector noted a secure and covered cycle store in the rear garden. She noted that bicycles would have to be taken through the appeal property via the dining room and the kitchen, and said it's not an optimum arrangement, and it may be inconvenient for some of the occupants, but it's not uncommon in terraced houses. And there is no substantive evidence that it would harm living conditions for occupants or deter occupants from using bicycles. Consequently, the appeal was allowed. There was no application for costs on this one. Okay, so we haven't had to defend our position in relation to costs. But what it does do, as you know already, appeal decisions are material considerations when we consider other comparable development. And I suppose in this case, the inspector has, in particular, bedroom 3, has said that a room that is around 1 square metre, at least, below the licensing standard is acceptable, because in the round, the amenity space provided here is sufficient for the 3-bed HMO. So just wanted to present that to you, feedback these decisions that we're getting through appeal, because we talk about it a lot, but this is a very recent one on a recent decision made by this planning committee. So hope that's helpful.
Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Joanne, for that explanation. But it concerns me that inspectors are running roughshod over our planning guidance, which we control. And I am concerned about this for future developments and other HMOs as well, because it's not right that they do this type of thing when we make the planning guidance, we stick by the planning guidance, yet then it's just kicked out of touch. And I'm a bit disappointed in the inspectors at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Rheoli.
Exactly the same as Trevor. Although this is an opinion, I know it's a fact, but the fact is it's that opinion of that inspector, a different inspector, a different opinion. Again, as I said earlier, we may disagree with you, but we do respect your advice, and we understand the framework that you have to work within. Even the framework that you were given to work within, they can poo-poo that if they wish. So it's really, you're stuck between the devil and the deep blue seas officers. And we too are in a very precarious place. I think the planning system and the licensing system of the whole of the UK seriously needs to be revisited and looked at again. Thank you.
Councillor Horton.
Thank you, Chair. Andrew, what was your recommendation on that one? I didn't catch if you said, sorry.
The officer recommendation was approved subject to conditions. It was a committee overturn.
Okay. So what did licensing say about the size of the room, if you've got the notes, if you do have the notes at hand?
Sorry, Joe will have a look now.
Okay. It's just, it's like, just reiterating what's already been said, that room was significantly smaller, and I find it difficult to to understand how somebody would deem your personal private space can be compensated by a communal area that essentially is living with strangers. It baffles me, and again, it's like what Councillor Atley said. The whole framework, it just seems inconsistent, is the phrase I'll use. But it'd be interesting to see what the licensing said about the size of that room. But would I be right in what was said in the presentation, that the standard was kind of like a guideline? Is that how it came? I'm not sure. I'm not saying that's how the officer interpreted it, but it came across to me from the report back that there was the sizing was more of a guideline than a rule.
But my understanding, and this might be wrong, so please bear that in mind, is that in England those sizes form part of legislation. In Wales, they don't. So I believe in Wales they are guidance, and as you'll be aware, you give a different amount of weight to legislation or guidance. So I believe that's where it sits in terms of that specific question. It's an England-Wales discrepancy or divergence, I suppose. But yeah, in that particular respect. So I'll hand over to Joe now in terms of the other question you raised.
Hey.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, go on. Sorry, it's a different question anyway. So if you continue, please. Sorry.
Just to say, HMO licensing didn't comment on the size of the room at all.
Okay, so they made a reference to a kitchen which was smaller, but they didn't reference a bedroom which was considerably smaller.
They didn't reference either. They didn't reference either.
Okay. Okay. No, sorry, I meant to the application we talked about earlier with the 10% smaller. One other quick question, and you probably won't answer this or won't be able to answer this. Do the appeals process have any quotas, or is it completely arbitrary?
In terms of how many appeals are submitted, or how many are dismissed, or
how many they've got to allow through, and how many they've got to dismiss?
No, I don't believe there's any requirement, as in fact, I'm positive there's not, that they have to refuse, dismiss a certain amount. And that's where some of the stats around appeals can be a little misleading. It depends what kind of appeals you get in. You know, as I said, we could have 10 appeals dismissed because they're 10 really, really poor applications. On the same time, you could have ones that are really close, and as a council we've gone one way and they go against us. So there's no set requirement that PEDU have to approve or dismiss, either way you want to look at it, a certain amount of appeals.
But the crux of the entire problem is that it's not written into legislation, these rules around HMO. No. Okay. All right. Thank you, Andrew.
It just seems like sometimes some of these bedrooms, you know, they're smaller. Well, they're big. Well, they're smaller actually than prison cells. When you think of it, sometimes, you know, like a 5 meter. That bedroom there is that small. You know, it could be like, you know, you get bigger prison rooms. I think, you know, prison cells bigger than that.
I'm not commenting on prison sizes.
When was you in prison, Councillor Jordan?
I just see the pictures of it from Alcatraz. Do you know what I mean? I've seen them. My cousin was in Alcatraz. You know, those rooms there are bigger than those rooms in there. But we've always had problems with HMOs. Do you mean, you know? And it's the bugbear of our lives. Do you mean, you know? Would you want to live or, you know, sleep in a room like that yourself? Do you mean? You know, you can look at when we look at those applications. You know, would I want to pay money to sleep in a room that size? Do you mean I would rather a bigger room? You know, by look at that application, Warman Road, my brain was thinking, well, cut off some of the living room, make it a smaller room, the living room area, make that into a bedroom, extend the kitchen and dining room, you know, the living room and the kitchen open plan, and use the bedroom upstairs as a storage room.
Councillor Rheoli.
Thank you, Chair. Just a general discussion with Andrew and anybody else that wants to jump in, that you understand the frustrations of this committee with regards to HMOs. We're not against good quality HMOs. We have them in the city, and they're worth looking at. What we're as a committee is against is these poor standards within some of the HMOs that are coming today, and you understand that we have a sympathy with you as planners. How can we, as a planning committee, advance our feelings then through a planning portal to actually raise the standards? Because I think the standards that we allow for HMOs are far too low by today's modern living. So we need to raise the standards up. We need to have the conditions higher. How do we achieve that? With your help. I mean, not about political stuff here. How can we do it? How can we influence that?
A big issue with HMOs, firstly, they are cross-cutting. You know, as I said, there are waste issues, there are licensing issues, there are planning issues, there are other issues around them. I think everything we do has got to be, from a planning perspective, this is all I can advise on, from a planning perspective, it's got to be evidence-based. So what is the harm of having one room necessarily that is marginally deficient? For example, I'll say marginally rather than significantly deficient. So we have to have evidence, for example, that we wanted minimum sizes, and those minimum sizes, let's say we said 9 metres for a bedroom, for example, 3 by 3 metres, that's what we do. We'd have to have evidence that that was acceptable, and anything under that was unacceptable from a planning perspective. That is where I think we will struggle in terms of how you get that evidence, how you evidence the harm from that. Clearly, licensing at some point has set these standards for what they think it is. I'm not aware of anything that says those standards result in a poor amenity for those residents. So that is the difficulty we've got. As I said, there's certain things we can look at. There's certain things, trying to get that evidence base, it's really difficult. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I wouldn't know where to start in terms of how you check every room size in every property and the impact that has. Because someone will potentially live in these places and accept that they are willing to live in that room.
What I was suggesting is how do we change from, say, the 3.3 to 12.12? How do we make a significant change to raise the standards up, and therefore then creating a new planning environment that not only you could stick to and that we could endorse, but offers a better standard of living for those people who need to go into that situation at that moment in time?
Yeah, it comes back to an evidence base. As I said, any policy we have to have evidence of what it is we're trying to achieve.
What I'm trying to say is, how do we change it? Okay, we can find evidence base. So where do we take that evidence when I find it?
So if we've got evidence, yeah, as I said, we could look at introducing. So at the moment, as I said, and bear in mind, this isn't a new issue. This has been an issue since I've joined and long before. But we look at what other authorities are doing. As I said, to my mind, the best place, if there's legislation specifying a minimum standard, that would be licensing. But if we look at planning, supplementary planning guidance at some point, but we would have to have evidence that a bedroom that is 6 metres is deficient and 7 metres is all of a sudden the standard. And the problem we will have is because we'll be diverging from the licensing standards, which I suspect people will say that's where they should sit in terms of minimum room sizes. Now, I don't know. I understand John Keane has explained there's an appeal system for licensing as well. I don't know how that works in England in terms of these minimum standards, whether you still have discretion or not. I don't know. But it's whether there's how much evidence is in the minimum room sizes. If that is that's one of the issues. There's so many issues here in terms of parking, in terms of waste, and we do speak to colleagues about them to see what the requirements are and how we do it. HMOs are a very emotive subject. We all know that. As I said, you're aware of it because every application pretty much that is recommended for approval comes before you. We refuse a lot of applications for HMOs where we think it's unacceptable, but you don't see those because they're not called committee because the members are happy with the decision.
No two houses are the same size, are they? Do you mean?
No,
so,
no.
And that's, if like Will said, how can we, do it? We need to have like a specific size of a house, a specific size of what can become a HMO. I think that'd be a situation. And in an ideal world, I suppose. Yeah.
Ideal world, yes. In real world, as I said, there'll always be something, a slight deficiency here could be offset by something else where you weigh something else up. That's what we do. We're always weighing things up. And as I said, planning is, in the UK, very discretionary. It's not black and white. It's not paint by, colours. We consider these issues, and even when there is the deficiency, we weigh up, is it acceptable or not? And it's not that we always lend and lean towards it being acceptable, but you see the ones we do think are acceptable. That's the difference, because the others are determined under delegated powers. Councillor Reynolds.
Councillor Reynolds.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. To be honest, I echo a lot of the sentiments that have been expressed already by the elected members. It's hard to disagree with any of it, to be honest. And as elected members and as politicians, we obviously want to represent our communities the best we can and look after our residents as best we can. And we all have our own sort of perspective, if you like, our own ideas of what's is acceptable in terms of living standards and size of rooms and accommodation. We all want what's best for our residents. The problem we've all got, and I think this has been sort of expressed already, really, is that as a planning committee, we have to abide by the rules and the planning regulations and the guidelines that are set in front of us. And we've had lots of examples. We've had one today where our gut instinct and our morals say this is wrong, but we know by saying or by objecting to it and taking it to appeal, in all probability the council's going to lose, and then we get accused of wasting taxpayers' money. So it's a really difficult one. But Andrew just used the phrase that I was going to use, which is evidence-based. We have to, if we're going to refuse applications and send them to appeal, we have to have the evidence to back it up. And I've got to be honest, if I could go back, I know the vote's been taken now, but if I could go back to the HMO we had earlier on, I did say that myself that I was finding it difficult to find planning reasons to refuse it. Andrew suggested a way forward and put forward a wording which I went along with. I think based on what I just heard now, I would probably change my vote and stick to my guns. And as much as I morally object to that application, I think on a planning perspective, I would have to say that I would have to let it go through. And that's the conundrum we're in all the time. Where our political and our community objectives clash with planning rules.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Councillor. As I said, I appreciate the difficult position members are put in with HMOs. And your position on planning committee, which is to make planning decisions effectively. We will continue to bring any relevant appeal decisions specifically on HMOs, because I do know the issues it does create for yourselves, for ourselves, for information, for discussion. As I said, it's useful to have a discussion around these things. You might not necessarily agree with the decision, but we've got quite a few appeals pending. we'll bring them, irrespective of what the outcome is, so members can understand what PEDU, Planning Inspectorate, think on decisions. Thank you.
I know we don't like, I know we don't like them, but we know there's a shortage of houses, everything else, and places for people to stay. And I know some people that try and, I know some people do it for the benefit of the money for the house. They got a house, they get more revenue for the house, whatever, you know. And I know there's people, I know there's quite a lot of one person people out there who haven't got nowhere to live. Do you mean? So HMOs are just right for them. Do you mean? For where they want to stay. Do you mean? Because there's one person, there's no more than one person who lives there. But it is hard, I know, and I can see where people are trying to get to. You know, there is people waiting for houses, and it's not enough.
Councillor Watkins.
Yeah, Chair. Councillor Rheoli said, how do we change things? How do we change the thing? And it struck me that we have a large development in Newport now going to student accommodation. And what is the requirements, or is there any legislation in place for the volume of student accommodation for each student, and also a single bedroom in a hotel? What sort of legislation is in place for that? If Andrew can look at that and then come back with some comparisons, it would be ideal for members. Possibly we can change our legislation then to accommodate those.
So the sizes of bedrooms in a family home, a small bedroom is acceptable because they can put their stuff elsewhere within the family home. In a HMO, it's your private stuff and you're being expected to keep it in a social area. The thing is, we need to have a bigger bedroom size in a HMO than necessary in a family home. I'm disappointed that the appeal was granted, but I'm even more disappointed that licensing granted on a bedroom that was too small and a kitchen that was too small. So we have to go and have a look at our licensing as well.
I just think that's you're right. I mean, great question from Trevor. I mean, great question that was. But I think fundamentally, all of us in this chamber, we need to see a more humane planning system, a more humane environmental system, because I don't agree with this. And the only thing is, until we get a more humane system in place, I guess I'm always going to be around with you somewhere along the line, Andrew, and that's just the way it's going to be, I guess. So I apologise in advance.
I think you're right, Councillor Rheoli. But I think we should have a set standard, not the standard we got now where you can 10% this way, 10% that way. If you've got a firm set standard, it'd make it easier for us and for the officers too, I think. Councillor Orton.
Thanks, Chair. I am going to have to go after my little comment I'm about to make. I was just doing a quick Google search because I'm trying to find some information, and I'll leave you with this note. This is probably going to sound like a Councillor Rheoli quote. The minimum requirement for a dog kennel is 1.9 square metres. Okay. Sleeping area for the dog is for a kennel that's been built is 1.9 square metres.
Just for a clarification, what type of dog would that be?
It's got to be twice the length of them lying down. No, I meant as it is the sort of thing you would say, Councillor, not I wasn't referring to you as being an animal.
Oh, absolutely not. I never took it that way. I tried to identify the breed. Is it a Chihuahua or something slightly bigger?
Well, probably a British Bulldog for you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Have a nice day.
I am sorry, Chair, but I am going to have to go. I guess we're going to wrap up anyway. All right, thank you.
Okay, bye.